Well, I think the whole program is 58 minutes, and
so you should signal to me in a way
yeah,
to
sure. I'll tell you. I'll interrupt.
Wind down my
Right.
my.
We're going to we'll have an opening statement, and then we'll see if we have any questions, and then I'll ask you a question just to break it up a little bit. And
you get questions during the...
Yes, that's what she's here for.
Oh, I see.
She's the only one crazy enough to do it. That's what I'm going to say.
Okay.
And we have all of
Yeah, and encourage them to pose provocative question.
Provocative, yeah, we'll say be provocative, but polite.
I'm writing them down.
Yeah.
No, but I rather get provocative, controversial than kind of a Greek-wire type question.
Yeah.
So this is an opportunity to refute certain
Right.
misperceptions.
Right. Okay, I think it's time.
What they don't write, I'll make up.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. So go, start. Shalom. Welcome to tonight's online program, Defining Zionism in the 21st Century. Tonight, yes, we're here in Jerusalem, and it's night. 11 o'clock at night, in fact. My name is Barbara Sofer, and I'm your moderator tonight here at Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem, where I serve as Israel Director of Public Relations for Hadassah. It's 11. The coffee shop is still open. It's a cool, beautiful Jerusalem night. 2 nights before Shavuot. The shops are full of cheese. Everyone's out making cheesecake. But before I introduce today's presenter, I want to remind you to register with live stream. If you haven't done so, now is the time. Once you register, you can add your comments and questions via the chat box on the side of the screen. We're waiting for your feedback. The word Zionism was coined by a 19th century publisher in Austria named Nathan Birnbaum, and we've been arguing about it ever since. The goal of this program is to create a safe and respectful space to share our views. We don't have to agree. In fact, we never agree. But it's essential to express questions and comments in a respectful way. But feel free to be provocative. Also, my friend and colleague, the indomitable Barbara Goldstein, will be writing down your questions and comments. You know BG. Who else would be crazy enough to be here at 11 o'clock at night with us? Here's a secret. She doesn't have great handwriting. Make the comments short. Thank you, BG, and thank you, Yuval Ayubi, our good-natured technical consultant who is here as well. Now to our presenter. Talk about good nature. Our presenter is Ambassador Yoram Ettinger. We're very lucky to have him. And thank you, Yoram, for being here with us. He's an advisor to Israel's cabinet and Knesset members, and he briefs legislators in the U.S. also on Israel's contribution to vital U.S. interests, on root causes of terrorism, and on other issues of bilateral concern. In fact, you can ask him anything. He's very well informed and polite. He served as Minister for Congressional Affairs in Israel's U.S. Embassy in Washington, as Israel's Consul General in Houston, you Texans may know him, and Director of Israel's government's press office. He has fascinating ideas that just might change the way you think about the Middle East forever. Ambassador Ettinger, why don't you start with a few comments on this beautiful evening in Jerusalem, not about the weather, but about our favorite subject, Zionism.
Well, it seems to me that being a Zionist or being a realist is to be aware that each one of us is exceptionally privileged to live at this particular time when we witness and participate in the reconstruction of the Jewish Commonwealth. Jews were waiting for 2,000 years for that to happen. What were the odds that we would be born at that time? And such a unique privilege entails, in my mind, also very unique responsibility to make sure that this reconstruction of the Jewish Commonwealth reaches new dramatic heights, as indeed it has done or has achieved since 1948, when the founding father Ben-Gurion established the Jewish state.
But it's the 21st century. We have a state of Israel. We all know a bit about the history. But what's Zionism today? How can we express our Zionism today? We talk in the DAS about practical Zionism, and most of our participants tonight don't live in the state of Israel. They don't live in Jerusalem like you and me. Can you give us some ideas of practical expressions of Zionism that people can hook into today? Those of us who are attached to history, and those in future generations as well, this next generation and their children.
Well, there's no doubt that the essence of Zionism is summarized by one word, and that is aliyah, the realization of the ingathering. And in fact, in 1948, it was a community of 600,000 Jews. Today, we have reached already 6.5 million Jews, including the 300,000 Olim from the USSR who have yet to be recognized as Jews by the rabbinate. They are Jews through the law of return, but they are not halachically recognized as Jews. But in any case, this achievement of gathering 6.5 million Jews has been achieved mostly through aliyah. Israel has become the number 2 high-tech power in the world, second only to the US, primarily because of aliyah. And in fact, today, aliyah to Israel is nothing like aliyah during the initial years, where it took somebody with a frontier-like mentality to come to Israel and in fact sacrifice something. Today, anybody who comes to Israel through aliyah is joining definitely one of the most successful economies of the world. In 1948, it was a $1.5 billion economy. Today, 2014, we're talking about $300 billion economy. At a time where exports of almost every developed nation goes through the dramatic decline, Israel sustains very high level of exports due to the very unique niches which we have developed, once again, mostly through aliyah of Jews, resourceful people from anywhere from the Soviet Union through the US, through Europe, and even through Ethiopia and other countries, people who have been integrated into the high-tech, highly educated society in Israel and already contribute to the growth of Israel. We're talking about a country with $90 billion in foreign exchange reserve. We're talking about a country with one of the lowest unemployment levels in the world today, 5.6% unemployment. The ratio of public debt to growth domestic product has been contracted down to 67% at a time when in the US public debt to GDP ratio is well over 100%. And militarily, certainly we're talking about one of the most powerful countries in the world. Also when it comes to defense industry, Israel is the fourth or the fifth largest exporter of defense commodities. We are in fact the number one export in the world of small and medium-sized space satellites. Who would have thought that the Jewish state would lead the world as far as development of small and medium-sized space satellites? And one can mention more and more such dramatic innovation, cutting-edge technologies, and progress achieved by Israel during the last 66 years. But the bottom line is that any Jew joining Jews in Israel today is not required to sacrifice much. If anything, you are joining a winning team. We are winning, we are progressing, and in fact, most encouragingly maybe is the demographic phenomena. We are talking today about a country which is well over 3 babies per woman, mostly because of the exploding secular Jewish community in Israel. And at a time when China and Japan and the whole of Europe, and to an extent US, expect to experience a very dramatic economic constraints in 20 years due to lack of babies, lack of manpower, Israel today, where the 2 Jewish spouses are Israeli born, we're talking about 3.4 babies per Jewish woman, which means as solid as the economy today, in 15-20 years, we should expect much rosier economy, and certainly very, very substantial reservoir of recruits to our national security.
Well, I love your very, very, very optimistic description
Realistic.
of life. Realistic and optimistic. I live here too, and I have to say I've had 5 children, so I'm even over the average of the 2 Israeli-born secular as 2 American-born parents, and we have 5 children, and our children are doing their share as well. But nonetheless, I think that there is some gap between your description of how absolutely easy it is and how to join the winning team. As someone who has experienced Aliyah myself and who lives here, I think that we sometimes don't understand that there is this difference in culture when you go in the United States. There's still a difference in salary. There's still a difference in the level of your lifestyle, and there's a kind of level in, I would call it a jauntiness level, that a person, I know that when I go back to American campuses, I look at those kids thinking my children were never that relaxed, because living here in this country, you have the burden always of defense as well. So not everybody, I know I would be as happy as you are to welcome each and every one of our listeners at the airport, coming on Nefesh B'Nefesh, coming to welcome them, and they're all invited to my house next Friday night for dinner. I invite everyone who makes Aliyah this week. Nonetheless, it's probably not practical to think that every single person listening to this program is going to pack up quickly and come and move here, although that's a worthy goal. What are other ways in which people can express Zionism today in a way which shows their identification with a Jewish state still living in the diaspora?
Well, certainly not everything is rosy, but we should realize one cardinal element, I believe, in human life, and especially in Jewish life. It is pressure which yields the best of us. Pressure, challenges, opportunities in disguise. We have plenty of that in Israel, and anyone who would like to have eventful, challenging future certainly would find Israel a formidable platform. When it comes to other than Aliyah, Zionist involvement, certainly involvement with organizations, with initiatives which make Israel more robust society, medically, human services-wise, militarily, economically, educationally, etc., is an expression of Zionism, whether it is Hadassah or whether it is any other organization. And certainly when it comes to what I would call bottom line politics, in the U.S., each one of our counterparts or interlocutors on the other side of the ocean knows that there is a congressman or a congresswoman representing the district. There are two senators representing your states, and there's no doubt in my mind, being experienced with Congress, they would welcome your information, your position on issues dealing with U.S.-Israel relations in general or Israel in particular. And certainly your contribution to such dialogue with your legislators would be very, very much of an essential element in advancing the stock of the Jewish state. Congress has played a key role in shaping U.S.-Israel relations, many times, by the way, in defiance of the administration. When it comes to Israel's vitality, it has to do with the level of education of this country, and therefore any involvement with the educational aspects of Israel, be it any of the universities, be it any of youth movements or any other educational ventures, research institutions in Israel, would be very, very important. But if you do consider yourself, as you indeed are, major amplifier and multiplier of the cause of the Jewish state, then you would contribute plenty. And there's a saying that sometimes a blade of a grass can deflect a cannonball. Each one of you is much more powerful than a blade of grass, and you can certainly deflect a cannonball.
We have some questions coming in from around the United States and maybe around the world. So we would like you, one of our listeners, his name is Sally, wants to know, do you really mean that in order to be a Zionist we have to make Aliyah?
No, I didn't say have to, but there's no doubt in my mind, being aware of the vitality of the Jewish communities throughout the world in general and in the U.S. in particular, I'm aware of that. But there's no doubt that the ingathering of Jews is the essence of the Jewish state. Aliyah is the soul of the Jewish state. Aliyah is the flesh of the Jewish state. And Aliyah is the most effective engine of growth of the Jewish state. And Aliyah is the way that each individual Jew can do the utmost for the Jewish state, but it's not the only way. It's certainly the most important way. And as a person who's been involved with U.S. Congress since 1989, as I mentioned before, any involvement with House members, with senators, and I would say especially with staffers on the Hill, staffers away from the limelight, they are the most important population on Capitol Hill, which, by the way, do not face any campaign. Being involved, cultivating relations with staffers on Capitol Hill with regard to U.S.-Israel relation is one heck of a contribution to Zionism in general and to the enhancement of U.S.-Israel relations in particular, and this is something that every single American can do. And by the way, there are many more Christians in America who do that than Jews, and not only in absolute number, but I venture to say even in proportion to the population, there is a higher proportion of Christians in America who do that than Jews, and therefore this is a major challenge for Jews in America to catch up with the Christian community and not necessarily the evangelicals. Christian in general, who are, as of today, much more involved with U.S.-Israel relations than are American Jews. And I would add that, again, from my experience on Capitol Hill, the most important legislation on Capitol Hill expanding, enhancing U.S.-Israel relations have always, but always, been initiated and led by Christian legislators, not by Jewish legislators.
Very interesting. Well, if we talk about the impact of American Jews on policies relating to Israel, one of our listeners, one of our viewers, it's hard to see them, but we guess we have viewers out there, how much say should American Jews have in Israel's security?
Well, obviously, again, if you want to have a real say, you can do it by joining us here in Israel. Otherwise, you certainly can have a say by impacting the relations. And again, I'll give one or two examples. At the time when the Bush-Baker administration, Bush Sr., had a pretty bad chemistry with Prime Minister Shamir, one of the worst relations ever between the two administrations. U.S.-Israel relations expanded unprecedentedly in spite of President Bush, in spite of Secretary of State Jim Baker, but due to Congress. And Congress at that time expressed the will of the American people, again, Jews and Christians in America. And as a person who was involved at that time at the Israeli embassy, I know for a fact that to a large extent it was the voice of the constituents which reached the offices on the House side and the Senate side, which made a cardinal difference in producing series of legislation and amendments to the appropriation defense bill, to the appropriation foreign operations bill, and other such American laws, which were eventually signed by President Bush, and I would say reluctantly, but it was the result of the American people expressing their will. It was a result of initiatives by legislators who are the most authentic representatives of the will of the American people. And any one of those of you who are tuning into this conversation can again make such a difference with persistent and systematic communications with your legislators on the House side or the two senators representing your state.
Well, when I hear you speak, though, I think it sounds almost as if you expect every American Jew to follow a strong pro-government Israel position. And we know, and particularly recently, that there have been a lot of voices within the American Jewish community that are critical of Israel, who don't always stand up for what the government is saying, who feel, for instance, that Israel is being very stubborn, that Israelis, we should be quicker to reach for a, let's say, as one of our listeners asked, what about this two-state solution? Is it realistic anymore? Are we being stubborn? Are we just pig-headed? Are we thinking that we don't have to make compromises when we should? And sometimes American Jews could be even uncomfortable about what looks like very strong and uncompromising positions that we have, and I'd like you to discuss that a little bit, your own views, and how people who may be taking part in this conversation, who have different views, should create a positive dialogue.
Well, let's put things in a realistic perspective. Anybody who assumes that the Arab-Israeli in general or the Palestinian issue constitute an axis, let alone a chief axis, of U.S.-Israel relations is absolutely wrong. The fact is that as important as the Arab-Israeli conflict may be, as important as the Palestinian issue may be, there are many more important issues for America and therefore for U.S.-Israel relations than those conflicts. In fact, you look back at the years from Ben-Gurion 1948 through Shamir 1992. From Ben-Gurion through Shamir, there was a very deep, wide wedge between the American and the Israeli administrations. The U.S. did not want a Jewish state in 1948. The U.S. imposed a military embargo on Israel on Mr. Ben-Gurion during the war of 1948, while the British were supplying arms to the Arabs. The U.S. pressured Ben-Gurion to refrain from annexing West Jerusalem, which the U.S. until this very day considers to be an international city. And all the way through Shamir, when there was a quote-unquote bad blood between President Bush and Baker on one hand and Shamir on the other hand, there was a complete lack of agreement between the two sides on the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Palestinian issue. But when you look at the dramatic expansion, surge of U.S.-Israel strategic cooperation, which catapulted beyond, I would even say, human imagination, the only conclusion is that U.S.-Israel relations transcends the Palestinian issue, the Arab-Israeli conflict, because it's based on regional issues, on global issues, and most importantly, on shared values, which, by the way, go back to the 7th century when the Arabella and the Mayflower arrived to America, and in the words of the leaders of those boats, they left modern-day Egypt and they sailed through the modern-day Red Sea and they arrived to modern-day Promised Land. But the primary concern for Jews and non-Jews who are involved on behalf of Israel should not be the government of Israel, but it should be American interests. An American Jew or American Christian cannot be effective unless you act on behalf of your own country, which happens to be at this stage the USA. And again, I'll give you an example from my own experience. When the Soviet Union collapsed at the end of the 1980s, Congress, House and Senate passed series of amendments expanding U.S.-Israel cooperation. One of them was the upgrading of the facilities of the port of Haifa for the Sixth Fleet. President Bush and Baker opposed it. The law passed, and it passed because the rationale behind it was that with the end of the Cold War, European ports became very unimportant for the U.S., but with the smothering Middle Eastern sandstorms emanating from Iraq and Iran, the port of Haifa, the port of Ashdod became that much more important for American interests. And therefore, as a result of that, Congress overruled administration's opposition and based on American interest upgraded the port of Haifa. When one talks about a two-state solution, I leave it with you with a question mark, but the question should not be whether this is what the Israeli government wants or this is what the Israeli government does not want. The question should be, would the proposed Palestinian state be good for vital American interests? Just to give you an idea, one of the remaining pro-American Arab countries is Jordan. There are less and less pro-American Arab countries since the Arab tsunami, which is smothering the Middle East. And by the way, you ain't seen nothing yet as far as the Arab tsunami. Jordan is very important for the U.S. A Palestinian state would threaten the existence of the Hashemite, pro-American Hashemite regime in Jordan. Top Jordanian military officials are begging their Israeli counterparts, please make sure that Israel doesn't go all the way to establish a Palestinian state. And the question is, would a Palestinian state, which by definition would threaten the existence of the pro-American Hashemite regime in Jordan, be good for American interests or be bad for American interests? Another point, Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian leader, is fluent in Russian. There is a reason for that. He is a graduate of Moscow University. By the way, that's where he wrote his doctoral thesis through denial of the Holocaust. Mahmoud Abbas is a graduate of KGB courses in Moscow. Mahmoud Abbas is a bosom friend of the leaders of Soviet Union in the past and Russian leaders today, as he is very close with Chinese and North Korean and Iranian and Cuban and Venezuelan leader. The question is, when it comes to American interest, would a Palestinian state, which probably would further entrench Russian, Chinese, North Korean, Iranian entrenchment in the Middle East, would that be good for American interests or bad for American interests? And once again, Israeli interests, in my mind, should take back seat when it comes to Americans working on behalf of U.S.-Israel relations. The predominant reason why U.S.-Israel relations have surged dramatically in the last 66 years, and much more so in the last few years since the eruption of the Arab tsunami, is because Israel is a unique ally of the U.S., much more than any NATO country, let alone any Arab country in the Middle East. And once again, just one or two examples which I experienced myself only a few months ago, flying for a lecture to Birmingham, Alabama. I was seated on a plane from Washington, D.C. to Birmingham next to a young man, maybe 25-year-old, and I found out that he served a year in Iraq and later on a year in Afghanistan, and he spent 4 weeks in Israel trained by top Israeli experts on confronting suicide bombers, car bombs, and the improvised explosive devices, the deadly IEDs, before going to Iraq, an additional 4 weeks before he went to Afghanistan. And according to him, he credits the fact that his unit came back to the U.S. without a single fatality to that Israeli contribution. How many countries are able to provide such service to the American national security? Talking with members of the intelligence community on the House side and the Senate side, one finds out very, very rapidly that the scope of intelligence which the U.S. receives annually from Israel exceeds that which the U.S. receives from all NATO countries combined. How many billions of dollars is it worth annually to the U.S. when such information does spare the U.S. possibly another September 11 or additional mini September 11? And certainly when one goes back to the statement made by the late General Alexander Haig, former Supreme Commander of NATO, former Secretary of State, when he was asked, how come you are such a flaming supporter of expanded U.S.-Israel relations? And he said, because I'm an American patriot who is aware that the Jewish state constitutes the largest American aircraft carrier, which can never be sunk, which is deployed in a most critical area for vital American economic and military interests. And if there would not be a Jewish state in the eastern flank of the Mediterranean, then the U.S. would have to deploy few more real aircraft carriers to the Mediterranean with tens of thousands of American soldiers, which would have cost the American taxpayers some $15 billion annually, all of which is spared by one Jewish state. And I could go on and on and on, sharing with you such tangible, real, unique examples. But the bottom line is, compared to that, the Palestinian issue constitutes more or less a tumbleweed while our car is smothered by deadly sandstorms. The U.S. is smothered today by deadly sandstorms emanating from Egypt, from Syria, from Iran, from Islamic terrorism. At that time, to be preoccupied by the Palestinian issue or the Arab-Israeli conflict is defiance of reality. By the way, it's defiance of the pro-American Arab regimes who are not preoccupied. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Jordan have not lifted a real finger on behalf of a Palestinian state. They do the talk, but they do not do the walk, because they realize such a state may not serve, probably would not serve their own interests, let alone American interests.
Well, we have a lot of questions coming in here, and I'd like to address those before our time is going. Of course, the contribution that we make is very, very important to us. We know that after the Boston Marathon bombing, that we here at Hadassah Hospital received thanks from the team in Boston because they had been trained, the hospital team had received training here in dealing with terrorism and also with treating terrorists and terror victims at the same time. These are experiences that we have gone through in our hospital, and people are always very grateful for what we're able to contribute. And certainly those who support Hadassah know that our doctors and nurses have made, and educators have made enormous contributions to world medicine. Not only, it looks as if we're the largest hospital in the world sometimes when you see how many publications and how much research is done. I'd like to ask a few. We said we'd be open to some rather provocative questions, and we have one from Betty Ann, who says to us, from my reading, it seems that many young Israelis are leaving Israel and are hardly Zionists themselves. So while you're preaching that we have the perfect country and we're, all of us subscribe to Zionism, how do you explain the lack of Zionism on the part of those Israelis leaving the country?
Well, first of all, let's be acquainted with reality. There are always Americans, let alone Israelis, British, French, who emigrate from their own countries, and certainly countries under pressure also produce more immigrants. However, in the last 5 to 10 years, we have experienced the lowest per capita number of immigrants since the 1980s. And at the same time, we have experienced the highest number of expatriates coming back to Israel since the 1980s. And the reason has to do with the relative strength of the Israeli economy, with the relative weakness of some Western economies, US included, Europe definitely, as well as with the growing reality that terrorism is becoming more and more a Western reality, not limited to Israel alone. In fact, when it comes to attachment to roots, here we are 2 days before the holiday of Shavuot, Pentecost holiday, and traditionally Jews devote the eve of Shavuot to an all-night study. Guess what? Tel Aviv, which is the capital of Israeli secularism, probably the source, the major source of Israeli immigrants, the capital of Israelis with cosmopolitan state of mind, who have no problem moving anywhere in the world. Tel Aviv, under the administration of a most left-oriented, anti-religious oriented mayor, Ron Khudai, whom I happen to know personally, Tel Aviv has become a major platform for a whole night study of the Torah on the eve of Shavuot, sponsored by that leftist, anti-religious, dovish mayor, who has recognized that this happens to be the roots of Jewish culture. The fact that more and more secular Jews do tune in to our roots reflects the very strong roots in Israel. When it comes to studying, by the way, the level of attachment to roots, there is a definite bottom line, and this is that one does not have to be a hawkish Israeli, a conservative Israeli, or religious Israeli to have major attachment to roots. In Israel, hawks and doves sit around the table during Passover. In Israel, hawks and doves, religious and secular, in Tel Aviv spend a whole night study before Shavuot, and by the way, also a whole night study before on the eve of Tisha B'Av. And I don't intend to impress anybody that all secular do that, but many more secular do it today than 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. And the bottom line is, when it comes to patriotism, when it comes to communal responsibility, when it comes to optimism in Israel, we experience nowadays one of the pinnacles of such sentiments in the Jewish state.
A number of, I would say, I'd like to make a cluster of several of the comments. People say, listen, we like this wonderful image of our strong Jewish state. But on the other hand, people say to us all the time, you strong Israelis now, using all your strength to push down those poor Palestinians. And we're uncomfortable with that. We're uncomfortable with that image of pushing down poor Palestinians. We have apartheid weeks at our universities. We have the voices from J Street coming into the Jewish community. Many people feel very strongly that we're too puffed up with our own strength. And how do you relate to that? We have a lot of people out here listening who want to know how you relate to that.
Well, this is certainly an issue for a separate multi-hour discussion, but in a nutshell, when one examines the reality, one sees, for instance, the US being asked urgently by the Palestinians to extend financial assistance to the Palestinian Authority. And thus one question, how come those Arab oil producing countries who benefit from over $100 per barrel do not extend $4, $5, $10 billion to the Palestinian Authority. For them, it's a petty cash item. They do it for Egypt. Why don't they do it? Why haven't they done it for the Palestinians? And there is a reason for that, because the Palestinians are not that timid, weakling, underprivileged member of the Arab family. In the late 1950s, Mahmoud Abbas and Arafat had to flee Egypt for subversion and for terrorism. They were some of the few of the leaders of the terrorist Muslim Brotherhood movement in Egypt. They were offered asylum in Syria, but by 1966 they became involved, guess what, in subversion and terrorism in Syria, and they had to flee Syria. Jordan offered Mahmoud Abbas and Arafat and their gang asylum. But by 1970, they tried to topple the Hashemite regime in Jordan. They triggered a very bloody civil war in Jordan, and they were expelled from Jordan to Lebanon.
But I'm going to have to say, let's just leap ahead to today. Last week we had the Pope here. He had his head bowed there near what he called the separation wall. That was an image of Israel acting in an unkind manner to the Palestinians. We are accused, again, the big bad Israeli, always abusing the Palestinians. This is a theme that we hear again and again and again. We can be self-righteous, but how do we a historical analysis doesn't always answer that person who says, look at that, the Pope had his head in contemplation last week. That's an image that went around the world as much as we tried to counter it. And we have people who are asking also, how do we counter these images that are very disturbing to us?
There are no shortcuts. Front page headlines do not reflect reality. Reality devoid of historical roots leads definitely to misread future and maybe even tragic future. And therefore we must know the facts of the past if we are to understand the present and spare ourselves the devastating errors of the past. For instance, the church was wrong on the Nazis. The church in a way collaborated with the Nazis. The church has been wrong for millennia when it comes to the Jews. Why suddenly we should assume that a pope who seems to be much more pleasant than his predecessors reflects authoritative reality? And again, I'll go back to Mahmoud Abbas. The question is, why don't Arab countries, why don't Arab leaders walk the walk but limit themselves to only talking the talk? Why is Mahmoud Abbas welcomed by a red carpet in Washington, and I'm embarrassed to say also in Jerusalem, while he's being welcomed with a shabby rug or by a shabby rug in every single Arab capital? Why do Arab leaders leave the room when Mahmoud Abbas gets up to speak at the Arab League gathering? And there is a reason for all that. Because Palestinians, as far as Arabs concerned, reflect again subversion, terrorism, ingratitude. They tend to bite the hand that feeds them. Shouldn't we be aware of it after 20 years since Oslo, where the Jewish state committed a remarkable gesture? The Ottoman Empire never contemplated a Palestinian independent state. The British Mandate never thought about establishing a Palestinian state. Jordan controlled Judea and Samaria until 1967. Never occurred to them to establish a Palestinian state, nor did Egypt in Gaza or the Arab League. The first entity to provide the Palestinians with their own rule over 40% of Judea and Samaria has been the Jewish state? What has been the Palestinian reaction to such historical, unprecedented gesture to the Palestinian folks or residents in Judea, Samaria? Unprecedented hate education, unprecedented non-compliance with agreement, and as a result of unprecedented hate education, also unprecedented manufacturing line of terrorism, and therefore unprecedented number of Israeli fatalities from the hands of Palestinian terrorism. Arabs were not surprised by that, because they have experienced that for many, many years. Now, I know that this is much more elaborate than small articles in a newspaper, and this cannot be condensed into a front page headline, and this cannot be condensed into a call into a radio talk show host, but this is the reality, and our aim should not be popularity. Our aim is to stick to facts, and when it comes to fact, the Jewish state has definitely been very top-heavy on human rights, very top-heavy on gesture towards our most murderous murders, providing them first and second and third and fourth chance, and most importantly, I believe, we have been very much in sync with Jews before 1948 as far as contributing to the vitality of global medicine, of global healthcare, global irrigation, global technology, science, etc.
We have a few other, time is running short, and we have a number of people who would like you to comment shortly about the Islamization of Europe and what you predict will happen with the growing anti-Semitism in Europe. And we would like you also to comment. You talked about, you ain't heard nothing yet about the tsunami of the approaching us here in the Arab world. So that if you could just give us some headlines at least about what you predict, your own prediction. We'll hold you to it in a few years when we'll remember this and we'll look back at what you predicted, but we'd like to ask some short prediction. What do you think is going to happen in Europe now with the additional anti-Semitic murders, many incidents, and the growing numbers of Muslims in Europe, and also what's going to happen here?
Well, the writing has been on the wall for at least 10-15 years. Arabs talk about the so-called claim of return. For us Jews, we think that the main issue is the return to pre-67 Israel. For Islam, the claim of return is primarily Spain. Muslim Islamic world today is preoccupied with retaking of what they view is their own terrain, namely Spain. Today in the area of Granada, Cordova in Spain, you have well over 1,000 mosques. You have an increasing population of Muslims, and they are not there to become Spanish. They are not there to be integrated into the European Union. They are there in order to reassert themselves. The same thing happens in southern France. The city of Marseille is not French, hasn't been French for many years. It's a Muslim city. Some parts of Italy, likewise. As far as Islam is concerned, anywhere where Islam ruled in the past is divinely ordained area to be Muslim. And by the way, Jewish state is included in that. And for anyone who's looking for the real roots of the Arab-Israeli conflict, for the real obstacle for peace in the area, go and study the notion of Waqf, divinely ordained areas of the abode of Islam when there is no room for the Christian or the Jewish or the Buddhist or the Baha'i in Fidel. Europe is now going through a process of suicide unless the Europeans shift gear. There will not be Europe as we know it today in 40, 50 years. There used to be time when Belgium was discussing the issue: is Belgium going to be a phlegm or a Walloon type of culture? Today there's no doubt. If the trend is maintained, Belgium is to become a Muslim state in 30 years. There are areas in Sweden where the Swedish police does not venture in because of Islamic presence. And I might say there are certain parts of America where we see the European precedent being repeated, whether it is in some parts of Michigan, some parts of Ohio or Illinois, some parts of New Jersey, or even some parts in West Florida, and even small enclaves in Texas as well. Muslim penetration of Europe has been an expression of the long-range planning of Islam. In that context, the Jewish state has been a very important and a very effective beachhead for Western values, for Western culture, and especially for very vital American interests. Those who are talking about the Muslim tsunami or the Arab tsunami should not be misled by the very gullible term of Arab Spring. There hasn't been spring in the last 4 or 5 years on the Arab Street. There has been tsunami, and again, you ain't seen nothing yet. There hasn't been a Facebook revolution. There hasn't been a youth revolution. There hasn't been any phenomena suggesting transitioning towards democracy, but in the mind of those who are willing to sacrifice reality on the altar of wishful thinking. In the battle against wishful thinking, there is no better ally for the U.S. than Israel. Both U.S. and Israel are the only Western societies with both the will and the capability to confront wishful thinking and to confront rogue regimes which are threatening not only remote area Afghanistan and Iraq. Pay attention to the scores or maybe hundreds of sleeper cells in different cities of the U.S. The question in the mind of many of the experts in American homeland security area is: when will the second shoe fall? In the attempt to prevent the second shoe from falling, once again, cooperation with Israel has played a major, critical, irreplaceable role.
Thank you. I think we have opened up a lot of very, very interesting subjects, and as I promised you, that many of your assumptions may have been challenged tonight, and that's why we're here. We've had a very nice response from people all over, and we tried to group together some of the many, many questions. I'd like to also say that one of the great assets we have here at Hadassah Hospital is that we often have people who come here who have different views, who come and see the reality that we have created here, also in terms of a bridge for peace, and also in terms of debunking any thought of segregation that we might have, and apartheid, that just the opposite happens here. And I would like to encourage everyone to make sure that to come themselves, and also if you know of a journalist or a congressperson who is coming to this area, that we promise them a fascinating visit right here. It doesn't have to be at midnight as it is right now. We take day tours as well. We want to thank you, Yoram, for joining us, and thank our whole team here. I'd like to say that our next presenter will be the Chancellor Arnold Eisen, from the Jewish Theological Seminary at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Daily Time, I guess that is. I thought we used to say Eastern Standard Time on Monday, July 9th. His topic will be why Zionism is relevant to us as American Jews. And we encourage you to join us on Twitter by using hashtag defining Zionism. So that again, the next time we're tuning in will be July 9th. And Yoram wants to have the final word here.
Not the final word, just that wish each one of you a happy Shavuot, happy Pentecost holiday. And when we celebrate Shavuot, we also celebrate the birth and the death of King David, and King David definitely has been the role model of defiance of odds, which is the symbol of the Jewish people in general, the Jewish state, but most importantly, Shavuot, when we read the scroll of Ruth, does teach us one very cardinal lesson: respect thy mother-in-law. Never forget that.
That's right. And as a mother-in-law, I'd like to second that, and I'd like to wish everybody a Chag Sameach, and go make your cheesecakes. Chag Sameach and Laila Tov.
And come on Aliyah, don't forget that.
Laila Tov, you join us. We'll make you the cheesecakes here. We'll see you soon. Let's be great to see you, and I look forward to seeing you all at convention, where we can discuss these matters in great depth, both in the sessions and in the hallways. So, again, signing off here from the hospital you built, and we support, and we love, here in the city we love, Yerushalayim. Laila Tov.